Hi, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. I'm joined today by Don Mahoney in sunny, beautiful, warm Wisconsin.
No, it's not sunny and it's not warm, but it's not as cold as it's been, so we'll take it today.
Sounds good. So how you doing, Don?
I'm well, and you, Rick?
I am good.
I'm excited that we have 2 shows, 2 weeks, 2 of my, some of the best people I get to engage with on Twitter and so forth. So it's going to be a great show.
All right. And here we go. We're going to do our quick intro, and we are good to go. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome again to eLearnChat. Don, would you love to introduce our guest today?
I would love to introduce our guest today. I suddenly have music playing. Is that supposed to be happening? Probably not.
No music playing.
Mark Sheppard is here to talk with us about tool selection and some lessons learned in a former environment. Welcome, Mark.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I'm
not sure if we're colder or warmer than where Dawn is right now, but it's sufficiently chilly.
Yeah. How far outside of Toronto are you?
I'm about 40 miles east of Toronto in Oshawa.
Ah, okay. That's lovely up there. And I always tell people I have the odd distinction or privilege of being one of the few people who's been to North Bay from the States, and twice.
Which, oddly enough, is where I grew up.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yes.
You're from North. It's lovely up there. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, right on the south shore of Lake Nipissing.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's funny. So, coincidence again.
Very much.
So anyway.
Okay, I'm back.
All right, Dawn.
I don't know what was going on. I had 2 screens going at once. It was kind of annoying. So I'm back. Can you see me?
We do.
Okay, good. So Mark has come to us to talk with us about, he has a humongous Google Docs that he is willing to share with people, and it has all to do with tool selection, the pros, the cons, the everything about it. Tell us a little bit about the genesis for building this robust thing you've got, Mark.
Sure. I started a new job with a company called Northern Lights Canada at the end of September of this year, and I was their first dedicated L&D hire. And one of the projects that they had asked me to take on was rebuilding of their corporate onboarding program. And part of that process was determining what kinds of tools we were going to use to build new activities, new curriculum, and things like that. And I've had experience with both web-based tools and also with desktop-based tools. And so I started doing initially a very small exploration of what was out there, and it morphed into a bit of a monster, but actually a very educational one along the way. Our organization's fairly distributed. We have 17 different locations in South and Southwestern Ontario. So we realized that we needed to have something that would accommodate subject matter experts in different locations to be able to contribute to building curriculum, starting to tap into that organizational intelligence. And we also wanted something that was going to be easy for them to be able to use. Most of these folks that I work with are employment specialists. They work in vocational rehab. They do that kind of work. And so they have tons of experience. We want to get that out to some of our new hires. And so cloud-based solutions were the way to go.
Definitely. Make it easy for them to grab. How did you sell the benefits and features of using Google Docs internally? Because I know in my former organization and others struggle with that dance.
I'm actually very lucky here that there's quite an enlightened management culture, and they acknowledge that their current file system has got some shortcomings, and they'd also gone through a fairly major IT integration. just to the point of getting everybody on the same network, getting everybody sharing the same stuff. But they knew that wasn't, done. So, so they were very open about me making use of the Google Doc and taking advantage of some of the show your work and work out loud trends that are taking over a lot of our activities. So they had no problems with me sharing it. They felt that if it was a simple way for me to engage in some dialogue, both internally and externally, then they were all for it. They're very big on autonomy and trying new things here.
Now, how did the Google Docs implementation roll out? Well, was it glitch free? Any issues, or did it go pretty smoothly?
For me, it was the Google Doc itself was a great way for me to record what I was doing. We use a lot of Google apps on the back end already, so integrating the doc wasn't a problem. What the big discovery was for us was that there were far more tools out there and in that space than we thought that we would actually find. So using Google Doc was just a simple way to capture the list of available tools and some of the criteria that we wanted to match against.
That's great.
And how has it been used and received?
It's been received very well internally. Again, there were a number of folks who said, yeah, we'd like to share some of our information, and we need a good tool to do it. So the Google Doc itself simply served a twofold purpose. One was to demonstrate that we can do that kind of collaboration with some simple tools, but also for them to be able to go in and start to add comments on the document itself.
Do you run into the traditional issues with inappropriate commentary or people messing up versions? How are you controlling versions?
That's actually been fairly simple. For the most part, I'm the primary author on this document, and because we have a lot of long tenured employees, we're pretty self-regulating, so we haven't had to worry about inappropriate commentary. But it might be helpful to take a look at the document so that you can see what we've tackled.
I would like to. Rick, is it easier for him to share a screen, or do you have the URL up that I sent?
We don't have it right now. So if you could share a screen, that'd be great.
Let me see if I can do that. Okay. All right. So I have it shared. Just let me know once you see it on the screen.
Yep, we're seeing it now.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the starting point for how this all came together. Christopher Pappas had posted a list on one of his many websites of a list of cloud-based authoring tools. And that was where I decided to start taking a look and investigate what platform names were out there. And so you'll see those tool names on the left-hand side. Some of them you may recognize. There's some of them that you may not recognize. So there's some of the some of the expected players. So we have companies like Lectora who are in there. We have Claro. We have Course Avenue Studio. We have Litmos and some of the other larger players. We also found that there's a number of niche players in this market as well. Across the top is my growing list of requirements. And you'll see that there's some of them that have been highlighted in red, and those were ones that we identified that were critical to us in terms of making any kind of tool selection. So this is a document that has grown pretty much since the middle of October is when I started tackling some of this initial investigation. So we're looking at some aspects like, can we do things that are branched? Because we have people who work in, say, employment counseling or employment assessment situations, being able to practice interview and assessment skills is pretty critical. So having the capacity to do branched interactions and nonlinear navigation for learning assets is a really, really big criteria for us. Also, are we in a position that we can find interactions that work very well? Can we make them templatable and save the development time? Right now, I'm the sole L&D practitioner here, although there may be others who will come on board as time goes on. But the ability to cut down on some of the manual work required in production of these kinds of activities was also huge.
Every time I look at it, I'm impressed. I'm not being able to see it right now, but I have looked at it in the past. I'm posting the link in the chat, in the comments area.
And we'll have it in the show notes, too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
This will all be in the show notes.
Yep. I just posted it in the comments area, so for those of you that are logged in, you'll see it listed there. Lessons learned for us.
What I discovered as I went through this process was that there were a lot of features that vendors added into their tools that were things that I hadn't thought of, and realized that they would have a pretty big impact on how we would actually use the tool. What I found, having gone through evaluations in the past, is that it's really easy to get lost in feature sets and a lot of stated capacities. And when I would take a look at different kinds of features, so for example, and I just want to pull one up here. So for example, saving and storing design notes. This is something that I had dealt with in the past, but there were a couple of tools that came up and mentioned, hey, we've got the ability for you to put all of your notations in the tool so that it becomes the repository, not just for building, but also for archiving and maintaining a history of what you're doing. And that's something that's pretty important to us. A couple of other things that we knew were important, like translation and finding out who does that. One of the other lessons that we learned as we went along is that doing evaluations like this and reaching out to vendors and talking about free trials gives you a way to assess the vendor as well. We found that there were some vendors who would bend over backwards to let you have access to a trial and let you have access to expertise, even though there's no money being spent. On the flip side of the coin, I was surprised at the number of vendors who simply didn't respond to requests for trials.
I wondered how far under the hood you could go with in your selection process.
Well, that was one of the other things that we looked at. Was somebody going to give us a partially featured tool, and then you would be able to get everything if you sign up for a contract, or could you have full access to the tool and go and play with whatever you wanted for a particular period of time? And so we found that there were some vendors who were very, very good about that. I also had one awakening when I looked at one tool, and I thought I'd really reached a decision, because I looked at the interface and I saw great project management features. I saw lots of really great stuff. And as I was going home that evening, I realized if I was running an instructional design shop for a large organization, this would be ideal, because it would give me the portfolio management aspects of the project. But if I was to turn that over to a vocational rehab expert and ask them to start building content, that just wasn't going to fly for them. And so that changed my perspective in terms of what the user experience was going to be like. We wanted something simple. We wanted an easy learning curve, but also that would give us the ability to produce really, really rich content to go on the back end.
And sustainable across time.
That's huge, because the content is never truly done. You may find that there's organizations that will spend a lot of time and a lot of money getting to version 1.0, and they pray that it's going to be a knock it out of the park thing. And then if it falls flat, as it sometimes does, then nobody really wants to try to tackle version 2. On the other hand,
you've certainly heard me spout off that it's all about an iterative process, right? We're never done.
And so, following processes like rapid prototyping or successive approximation give you that incremental approach. And it was good for us to look at tools that would actually help support those processes.
Very good. Well, switching gears, I want to be sure to cover the other topic that we discussed having today, which is lessons learned from short deadline projects. I think we all suffer from those.
Yes,
Scope
we do.
creep, unrealistic expectations. Tell me more.
In the role that I had before I came to Northern Lights, I was working on contract for the main technical training school for the Royal Canadian Air Force, and that's it's about 95 miles northwest of here. And there was a requirement from the operational squadrons that they were noticing a bit of a skills gap. There were some retention issues with seasoned staff, and these are people who are called aircraft structures technicians. And these are the folks who are responsible for things like the skin of the aircraft, painting. They're responsible for composites. They do metal work. But one of the new requirements that had been put at them a couple of years ago was that they had to start taking care of what's referred to as ALSI, or aviation life support equipment. So that's everything from life rafts to G-suits to helmets, emergency flares, all of that kind of stuff. So there was a big push to get legacy people trained, but they realized that there were not enough numbers available to support operations. Our school wasn't producing new students fast enough, and they were starting to lose people out in the field. So on December, I got to make sure I get my dates correct, December 18th, 2013, we got a requirement from Air Force headquarters in Winnipeg to pull together the legacy, or to pull together just the life support equipment curriculum and have it available online for about 400 technicians. And by the way, could you have that done by the 1st of February 2014, please?
Wow. By the way, Mark, switch us back to you, please. They're letting me know that you're still showing your screen.
Apologies.
That's okay. So how did you manage that? And when you picked your jaw up off from the floor,
Yeah, we did have to pick a number of jaws up off the floor. We did a little bit of a reality check with the headquarters because our school basically owns that qualification, or rather owned that qualification, and so they were a pretty serious stakeholder. What we did is we went back to headquarters in Winnipeg and said, look, if we're going to do this right, we're going to need a little bit more time. Let's tell you what we can do within that period of time versus what you want. Initially, they would have been content with just putting the PowerPoints up online, to which we collectively said, no. We're not doing that. So the deadline was pretty much hard and fast, and we said, okay, you're the bosses. And so we realized that this was going to be a pretty fast development effort. So what I managed to do was I pulled together a team of folks from our personnel awaiting training. These were kids who were ready to go into their technician training programs, but were just waiting for a course to come available. I had started working with a desktop-based tool, and I had enough proficiency with the tool that I thought, okay, I should be able to help get these kids up to speed, and if I sort of direct what the design is. So we started immediately after Christmas, because there was a Christmas break in there. We started after Christmas. We took all of the source material, did a massive transfer of the text. I spent a day and a half of getting the folks up to speed with some of the self-paced video tutorials and some of the other guides. And then played art director between then and the 28th of January. And we produced 29 interactive e-learning assets in 14 working days.
Ay. I got a million questions, but I'm kind of stunned all at the same time.
Yes, so it was basically a production shop, and the primary concern was just getting the content in. But when you've got something that's as complex as aviation, there's a lot of people involved in the stakeholding and review process. And it started becoming clear to the folks at Winnipeg that even though this February date was still going to happen, they had some serious reservations about how it was going to work. At our end, we resisted the urge to say, yeah, we told you this was going to happen. My squadron commander, who was a major, as much as he'd like to tell the general commanding of the air division that, yeah, we told you, sir, it's not really a good career move. So we went ahead with a small scale deployment, and it bore out a lot of our concerns with respect to the content. So what we were in a position to do was to actually go back to the division with a pretty detailed after action report saying, all right, we gave them the materials, we gave them as much support as we could. They went through and did the exams, and as expected, the pass rates just weren't where they were supposed to be. So we did a couple of working groups after that to start getting the content rebuilt, and they acknowledged, yes, we needed to give you more time. We probably needed to give you better resources, and let's see what we can do to manage expectations.
Wow.
But it was a pretty hard thing for the schools, because there were a couple of squadrons that were in danger of having to cease flight operations because they didn't have anybody qualified to actually do the life support equipment work and make sure that aircraft were safe to fly.
Kind of astounding.
It is hard. I mean, Canada's military is relatively small, and in one of the major locations where this was a requirement, up in northern Alberta, there's competition for trained technicians from the oil and gas industry. So keeping people retained was a challenge, which is one of the things that led to the drop off in personnel and qualified personnel. And also the complexities required in aviation for certification on doing particular tasks. It's very detailed, and justifiably so.
I have a couple of friends here in the United States that also developed for the Air Force, so I know exactly what you're talking about. The level of criticality kind of takes on a whole new feeling.
Exactly.
So your lessons learned were we need more time and...
Well, you need more time, but you also need to state the message that just digitizing what you have in what is normally instructor-led content is not necessarily the right solution. By changing the medium, if you want to go with something electronic, you want to go with something distributed, you need a bit of a different model to follow. You need some different support mechanisms for the learners, but also you need to make sure that the learners who are taking this material, if it's a really confined notice requirement, that they get the time dedicated to actually go and do the learning. That was another challenge that these folks had. They basically did a drink from the fire hose over a couple of weeks, and we had to backtrack and suggest that this needed to be spaced out. It needed to be interspersed with other activities. In that respect, just like they were doing in the classroom, because all we were doing was examining them on their theoretical knowledge, not their hands-on practical. That was a separate aspect of the program. Kind
of an expensive way to learn whether blended learning approaches work or not, I think.
It is.
You know, to go the wrong way first and then prove the hypothesis in theory. There's a question in the chat pod from John from Boston asking if you like the add-on features or do you use them in Google Docs. He says they're using the workflows add-on and like it.
I haven't explored the workflows as much in Google Docs. As I said, Google Docs was really just a repository for me to keep a list of the tools that I was looking for and the requirements. But I'd be interested in taking a look at some of the workflow options.
Yeah, I didn't even know they existed, so I'll take a look at those too.
Thanks to John for that.
Rick, we've been leaving you out. What questions do you have?
No, I'm listening. Partly because we're thinking the same thing. We're thinking of actually moving to Google Docs. We use it a little bit right now. We're doing show scheduling on it. We're doing some internal projects on it. We're kind of between Dropbox and Google Docs. Dropbox and Google Docs, and they both have their pros and cons. We find Dropbox a little bit easier in terms of getting docs to people, but it could be a firewall issue that we have. So we're trying to figure out, do we have a firewall thing? But for the most part, it works. It syncs pretty well.
And that's actually one of the other things that I've discovered in some locations is that yes, there are firewall restrictions against tools like Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, other places like that where they're less open about you doing work in the cloud.
Right.
I know that was certainly the case with my work with the Air Force. Those kinds of tools were simply blocked at the main firewall. I've used some other web-based tools in terms of project and task management. Not so much a key part of this discussion, but one of them that I've used with some success is Asana.
Yeah, we use that one.
Yeah, and another tool that I had used, which is much more of a web-based project management tool, is called Eclipse.
Okay.
Eclipse Project Portfolio Management. So for those folks who are familiar with MS Project and Microsoft Project Server, I used Eclipse with a previous employer and found the learning curve to be far less steep than there was with with a tool like MS Project.
Project is fun because you really don't manage a project; you manage MS Project, and that's
exactly
kind of an issue.
That's right.
That's why we don't use. I used to use that years ago and gave up on it. It just took too long.
It's not better.
It's not better. No, it really isn't.
Yeah,
we've used Asana. We've used Basecamp. We've used Project Bubble. Actually, I like Project Bubble. That was an English one. It was pretty good. But Asana's easy, and the price is amazingly cheap. It's free. I guess we haven't hit the level of use. I think it's 30 users, and then you have to pay a little bit, but it's not much.
It's funny, Rick, that you mentioned English tools. One of the things that I discovered as I was doing the authoring tools evaluation was that that's one of the concentrations of where players are in this particular space. There's a number of them in England. The other bulk that I had explored were, of course, in the US. What I did find surprising was that there were almost no players in this space in places like Australia. And I was reaching out to my PLN once I started noticing the geographical split because I realized I haven't seen anybody from the Australia side, and I know that they are huge on distributed learning
and they're
in that part of the world.
And they're good programmers too.
Excellent. There's such a rich technology base, and when you've got places like Southern Cross University, Monash University, who've been doing some incredible work in distributed learning research, I was surprised not to see that much there. But it looks like some of the other major North American players have a lot of that market taken care of. Of course, I mean tools like Moodle do have a significant footprint in that part of the world. Thank you, Martin Dujamas. So I suppose they're leaning more towards the open source side. Also notice they didn't see any tools from particularly from the Asian speaking portion of the world or some other parts of the world where I would have expected to see this kind of technology. For example, I only saw one, maybe two that were Canadian, which also surprised me a little bit.
Though one of them is in the top tiers, and that's Claro. They're doing very well.
Correct. Yeah, Claro's doing great, and they're another tool that I looked at where, if I was looking at, at a platform for a team of instructional designers, Claro would be one that would merit serious consideration for that kind of work. I did also find one in Latvia, of all places.
Latvia.
By the rate of speed that the apps are being developed for Android and I wonder if, especially in the Asian countries, if they've just gone that route and leaving some of these rapid tools and so forth alone.
That's possible. When I went through this list, it was interesting to see some of the tools that had dropped off the radar and were, say, no longer available for sale, or the organization had changed. So, for example, Kaleidos Cloud, of course, is now Litmos. There were a few others that had been purchased by others. And then you've got a lot of tools that are actually being resold under different names, which was interesting to discover.
That's true. Well, we've got about a couple minutes left. Any more questions in the chat room?
I just asked if anybody had any final questions. John made a comment that the reason they like the Google Docs workflow is that it helps with SMEs that are slow to respond because it dates and marks and so forth, I guess. I haven't read taking a look at the workflows. But he mentioned CYA, something we're all interested in.
and Don, that's actually one of the things that that was really critical for us when we were looking for authoring tools, was having access to something that would date stamp and name stamp review commentary. Because as CYA is one thing, but as you're letting your projects and your solutions evolve, it's not only is it nice to actually have that commentary and context, but also know sort of where it's coming from, gives you a bit of a sense of the individual and potentially their bias, but also just having it tracked. I would love to get all the time back in my life that I have spent managing flat Excel documents for review commentary for e-learning, which is one of the reasons why we decided to go with a cloud tool. I don't know a desktop tool out there that lets you do distributed reviews and distributed commentary.
Yeah, there are some.
But it's not there.
There's one called Review My Learning, which I believe is out of the Carolinas. It's pretty cool. It works pretty well, and I know Lectora has one built in to their online and their desktop version that I've played a little bit with it. It works pretty well too. Captivate had one. I'm not sure if they still work anymore, but I think
I'm
they
not
still
sure.
have it.
I know working with a previous company, I was using the Shift e-learning platform, and that was my first exposure to distributed review tools. I admit I fell in love with that concept, and when I had to go back to a desktop tool with my role with the Air Force, it was pretty arduous to slog through the change logs.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, we are at the end of our time, and
Wow.
Mark, we'd love to have you back on.
I'd be happy to be on again. This
Next
was great.
time we promise to have everything working.
I won't take it personally that I was your guinea pig or your lab
Yeah, no, we
rat
don't like
with the
doing that to
technology.
people. We thought we were further along. Just had a couple of small little problems, but we don't even like having those. So, but everything else ran okay. So we should be okay for the show. We'll put the links that you gave us in the show notes so people can get a hold of you and also take a look at the document you created. And again, we love having you on. And Dawn, thanks again for being there today.
I'm glad to be here. Very glad. Glad to talk with Mark.
That sounds great. Well, Mark, have a good one, and both you guys stay warm.
Likewise. Thank you. I guess in your
Send
case,
us-
right, stay cool.
Yeah, in our case, it's trying to get cool. We're going to be
Yes.
70, I think, today. So we're not
You're breaking my heart.
it's a tough one. It's California living. So
You gotta love it. Gotta love
Gotta
it.
love
Well,
it.
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
have a good one. And thanks, everyone. If you're in the chat room watching, thanks for being there. And there's a button to subscribe on top and bottom, so follow us on that. And if you're watching the recordings on Vimeo, please subscribe. Give us your feedback. We love hearing from you. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And we are done. We're still live.
Yay. Yeah, leave added in the chat room that Captivate Reviewer has not